Hey, everybody. I turned the lights down low. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate everyone coming. This has been really hard for me. So I had a really tough day today. 8 years ago today, my nightmare started with my son. And am I live, you guys? It says live. Can you see me? Let me know that you can see me. So okay, so it's live. So yeah, so I struggled through today. I struggle through every day. Um, I I made this channel. I made my first channel hoping that maybe I could use it as like an inspirational channel to help other parents that go through what I go through day in and day out, and to encourage them to keep going and that they can do this. And when I mean they can do this, like continue to breathe, continue to get on with life. And so in my memories today on my Facebook, um, I wrote this years ago and it came up in my memories, and my memories hurt, like the title says, my happily ever after was stolen away from us when my beautiful 8-year-old son was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Very rare, very, very rare. To this day, I meet people in the professional medical field and I tell them that my son died of pancreatic cancer, and they look at me with doubt because it's just non-existent. It just doesn't exist in children. It's usually kind of like an old man or woman's disease. When your pancreas gets sick, usually it's environmental, or sometimes they don't really know. They don't know. It could be alcoholism. I mean, smoking, environmental. They just don't know. So I started to document my journey on a prayer page called Please Pray for Denali Botolino. And in about 2 weeks will be the start of me documenting the journey. But I wanted to share with you what I went through 8 years ago today. So I wrote on my Facebook page, I'm going to read it from my Facebook page. He's been gone as many years as he was on this earth. My heart hurts today more than ever. It hurts like it happened today. So he would say to me, Mama, my tummy hurts. I would say, Denali, just go sit on the potty, you'll be fine. I found out later on that his third grade teacher, Mrs. Norbert, told me that in school he would say to her all the time that his tummy hurt, and she would say the same thing to him, go to the bathroom, Denali. So I would say, just go sit on the potty and you'll be fine. It was the last week in March. It was a typical Monday morning. I got all the kids up for school, got them dressed, made them breakfast. I never even looked at my son. Like, my kids were, at the time, Cesarina was 6, Angelina was 7, Denali was 8, and Massimo was 9. In my life was so full. We had the perfect life, the perfect family. Everything was just beautiful. My husband had a successful business, and we had moved here from Boston, and we were making a new life for ourselves. And we had so many friends around us, no relatives, just friends. All of our relatives were in Boston. But life was great. Life was perfect. It was perfect. You couldn't have asked for a better life. 4 beautiful, healthy children. I was PTO president at school. I was so involved in the community. My husband was the volunteer baseball coach for the town little league teams, and life was perfect. It was really perfect. So I got them all dressed, made them breakfast, and I loaded them up in the car and took them to the short ride to the school, just a mile and a half down the road. And I let the kids out in the front door. Actually, as I was driving down the road, Massimo said to me, "Oh, by the way, Mama, did you happen to see Denali's eyes?" So I said, "No." Denali, look at me, as I adjusted my rearview mirror to see him. The whites of his eyes were all yellow. I honestly had no idea what was going on. When I pulled up in front of the school, all the children got out of the car, including Denali. He had no complaints. My sweet boy was always so brave and strong. He had such a will and a fearless fight in him always. He would go out and play, and he would come in the house and he'd go, "Mama, Mama, Mama." And I'd go running and I'd say, "What's wrong, Denali?" And he would have like blood dripping from his knees from like falling down on his skateboard or whatever he was riding. And he'd say, "I'm so hungry," or "I'm thirsty." And I'm like, "Denali, you're bleeding." And he'd be like, "Oh, that's nothing, Mama." And he'd take a sip of whatever he took a sip of and he'd go running out the door. He was just so brave. Like nothing ever bothered him. He was the bravest little boy. And I don't say that because he was my son and because of what he went through. He just was. He was just a hero. He was brave and powerful and strong and caring and loving. So I parked my truck and I went into the nurse's office, and they all knew me at school because I was in school every single day with the kids because of PTO. And I went to the nurse's office and I told her, "My son's eyes are yellow." And she told me immediately, call the pediatrician, and that she would call him down from class. I took him to the pediatrician and they sent us across the street to the lab to have his first blood drawn. It was horrible. He had never had his blood drawn. He was 8 years old. He was just a little boy. But he was brave, and they were able to get the blood draw from him. I took him home to rest and waited for the doctor to call. From time to time, he would call out to me. He wasn't feeling well. He would curl up in the fetal position in bed, rocking back and forth from the pain in his tummy. I remember saying, "Let's just go sit on the potty." And he would cry and tell me, "Stay in the bathroom with him." I thought he was being ridiculous at 8 years old, and I would leave him. That breaks my heart. But in my heart, I knew something wasn't right. The doctor's office finally called the next morning and told me he was being clinically diagnosed with hepatitis A. At the time, I had no idea what clinically diagnosed mean. I didn't even know what hepatitis A was. Apparently, you get hepatitis A if you go to Mexico and you drink water, or you could get it from a parasite on a food, or I had no idea. Now I know what that term means. It's used when a doctor is not sure and the tests are inconclusive. That's when a doctor fits the description practicing medicine. Doctors, they're just all guessing. I called the school nurse and told her that the doctor's office had told me what the doctor's office had told me. She called the Board of Health. Moments later, a very nice lady from the Board of Health called me and asked me a series of questions and asked if I would sign a release so that she could get a copy of the test results from the lab. She faxed me the forms and I signed them and sent them back. Meanwhile, Denali's getting worse by the second and crying out to me, "Mama, help me, help me, help me." She asked me where we had been out to eat in the past 6 weeks, and I told her only in the school cafeteria, a pizza party, at a bowling alley, and that we had taken the kids out for sushi. I thought, oh, that was it, sushi. The sushi must have done it. He must have got a parasite. Wednesday morning, I was on the computer educating myself on what hepatitis A was. I was wondering what kind of symptoms I should have been looking for. My son had none of them. I was very confused and concerned, and Denali was getting worse. At this point, he was sleeping most of the day and had stopped eating and was drinking and speaking very little. I called the doctor's office again that afternoon. I told them I was concerned. They told me to bring him back in for a repeat blood test, which I did. I took him back again, and then I waited for the doctor to call. No call. On Thursday, I called the office 5 or 6 times asking to speak to the doctor for the test results. No call back. That afternoon, the woman from the Board of Health called me, and she said she had received the most recent blood results. She told me I needed to go and get another opinion. She was concerned. She told me that it was not hepatitis A. I was confused. I needed to get my son to another doctor, the emergency room somewhere. I finally got a call from the pediatrician's office again, only to speak to a nurse practitioner. I remember her words so clearly when I expressed my concerns of my son's health and that he didn't have any of the telltale signs that I was reading about on the computer. Fever, vomiting, none of them. She said to me, "Mrs. Botolino, your son has been clinically diagnosed with hepatitis A," in such a stern voice. So mean. "It must run its course," she told me. "I suggest you stop reading about symptoms on the computer." I said, "All right." She told me she still had no results from the second blood test. I told her that the Board of Health had got them and that they had called me. With tears, I told her I still hadn't spoken to the doctor and that he still had not been seen by a doctor. I told her what the Board of Health nurse told me, and she said that she would leave another message for the doctor to call me. Still no call. That night, we were awakened by Denali screaming and projectile vomiting. I got so scared, I immediately called 911 rescue. The paramedics arrived. My husband had already put Denali in the bath and washed him up from all of the vomit that was all over the place. By the time the paramedics had arrived, he was settled down. They checked his blood pressure, and he still had no fever. They offered to take him to the hospital, but they said, Mrs. Botolino, that I was doing everything right and that he was being seen by his pediatrician. There was really no sense to take him in. By now, Denali had fallen back to sleep. The next morning, I noticed his skin was starting to turn yellow. He couldn't even pick his head up off the pillow. He was so lethargic, and he wasn't making any sense when I was trying to talk to him. When I was asking him questions, the doctor finally called. The doctor told me that she was very concerned with his elevated liver function and that it hadn't come down on the repeat blood test, and it should have. She told me she wanted me to take him back to her office on Monday morning. This was on a Friday. She was going to give me a referral to go see a GI doctor. She told me that since it was Good Friday, most of the doctor's offices were closed. The doctor suggested in the meantime to watch him over the weekend. I was furious. I told her to prepare the blood work papers, that I was coming to get them, and that I was taking him to Children's Hospital, that he was in bad shape, and she wasn't listening to me. I told Ricky to come home right away. He had to stay home with the other children. They were so young at the time. The girls were only the sweet, tender age of 6 and 7. My brave Denali was 8. Massimo was only 9. It had been 5 days since my first visit to the doctor's office with him, and in 5 days he had deteriorated to a lifeless, sick little boy. I carried him out to the truck, raced over to the doctor's office. I remember the office staff looking at me with crooked eyes, making me feel like I was crazy, a crazy lady. I told them I had Denali sick out in the car, and they were moving so slow getting the records together. When I got out to the car, poor Denali was screaming, crying. He didn't know that I had gone into the doctor's office because I had left him sleeping in the back seat. He was so sick. We both cried all the way to the hospital. When I got to the emergency room, I carried Denali and crying out for help. At this point, he was in such pain. They had to strap him down to a board and try to get an IV in his arm. I thought it was the worst, most barbaric thing anyone could do to a child in pain. There was nothing compared to the torture we forced on him in the coming years. They gave him some morphine, calmed him down. They sent us into an ultrasound of his abdomen. I remember the ultrasound technician. She was so beautiful. She was so sweet. She was pregnant. We were talking about pregnancies. Never once did she let on that my poor baby had a huge tumor in his abdomen. She called the doctor to look at the screen. It was then, at that very moment, that I knew it was confirmed in my heart something was terribly wrong, just not right. That's when I started feeling my heart break. The doctor called another doctor, and they started to discuss with me that Denali had a tumor on the head of his pancreas, on his liver. They had never seen anything like this in a child so young, and chances were he had pancreatic cancer. I had no idea what they were talking about. I had to call my husband. I was all alone. The doctors were using words that I had never heard. The only word I understood was that Denali was in critical condition and he would die if he didn't have emergency surgery. I called Ricky and he came right away. They told us that the tumor was blocking the common bile duct and that Denali was in critical condition and had to go to Miami Children's Hospital 2 hours away by a trauma hawk helicopter. They didn't have a surgeon at St. Mary's that could perform the surgery that he needed. He needed to have emergency surgery immediately or he would die. They told us he had to go with the trauma nurse in the helicopter, and there was no room for me. We had to drive to Miami alone without our son. The thought of being separated from him made me lose my mind. I remember pounding the walls of the hospital, not understanding what was going on. He needed surgery to save his life. I cried and begged to go with him, and they said no. I refused to send him alone in the trauma hawk. All I could think of was that if he died, a mother's worst nightmare, he would die alone. The doctors kept stressing he was in critical condition. I couldn't let Denali die alone. So they made arrangements and sent us by ambulance. And off we went in a screaming, light-flashing ambulance to Miami to find a Dr. Denali. To find a doctor. Denali slept on high doses of morphine, and I cried and started making deals with our Lord in heaven, deals to save my son's life. I prayed to our Father. I was raised as a strong Catholic faith. And you pray, right? When you need guidance or you need help. So I prayed. Through tears, I prayed. I prayed for 27 months. And then I stopped praying. We never did find that doctor. Not in Miami, nowhere in the United States, not in the world. Because I'm Denali's mama. And I looked, damn it. I searched with every ounce of my being. I begged to trade places with him, with our Heavenly Father and the devil. I cried out to the Virgin Mother to have mercy. She knew what it was like to see her son being tortured and killed. I made a deal with the devil to save my son, and I would spend the rest of my eternity in hell. When your child is sick or hurt, you will do anything. I gave it all away. And finally, you lose it all. To save your child's life, you surrender your heart, your faith, your soul, your entire world. Poor baby never got that mercy. It's all I was asking for at the end, just a little mercy. He died the most evil, barbaric way possible. It's all over and your son, it's all over and your child dies. And then you're left to wonder How will I continue on in this world with no heartbeat, no will, no purpose, no breath, and a broken soul? But somehow, by the grace of God, you do. So, in about 2 weeks, I'm going to start reading my diary that's on Facebook. My everyday, my day in and my day out of the 27 months that we tortured our son to try to save his life from this barbaric disease. I want to thank everybody that came out to hear this. Yes. This is the real me. This is the real Donna. This is the real me. This is the real me. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me, supporting my family. I'll go back and read the chat. I can't right now. I'll be fine again tomorrow. I always am. I always manage to rebound. Always. I have a loving husband and 3 beautiful earthly children that adore me and I adore them. And they need me and I need them. And life is going to just keep going on. Broken, but it will keep going on. I love you guys. Thanks for being here with me. I'm going to go cry myself to sleep now. I love you. Thank you.